The air inside Bellamy's lounge was thick with wealth and pretense. Glasses clinked. Laughter rose and fell in rhythms dictated by expensive wine and performative charm. On the surface, everything gleamed, mahogany tables polished to perfection, velvet drapes catching the amber glow of chandelier light, and a grand piano stationed like a crown jewel at the center of the room. It was a place where reputations dined and egos feasted. But beneath all that polish, Bellamy's hid a different truth. One that only the staff understood. At the edge of this opulence moved Amira James, black apron, white blouse, and hair tied back so tightly you could see the tension in every line of her face. She was 27. A waitress. To most patrons, just another body delivering cocktails with a smile rehearsed to perfection. What they didn't see, couldn't know, was that 10 years ago, Amira had stood on a very different kind of stage. She had worn gowns, not uniforms. She'd been invited, not ordered. But life, with its cold hands and cruel detours, had a way of rearranging destinies. She was clearing glasses at table 6 when she heard it, "Hey, you." The voice was loud, nasal, and belonged to a man used to commanding attention. Harrison Moffat III, son of a shipping magnate and heir to nothing but arrogance. 34, stocky build, white, and so utterly self-satisfied that the smugness practically steamed from his skin. His friends, 3 men, 2 women, all dressed like privilege itself, chuckled at something he'd just said. Amira looked up, polite but guarded. "Yes, sir." Harrison leaned back, swirling his whiskey. "You ever play piano, sweetheart?" The question hung in the air not because of curiosity, but because of the sneer behind it. The tone. The smirk. The implication. She blinked. "I have." "Oh ho." He grinned wide. "Church music, I bet. Baptist gospel stuff. Am I right?" There was a pause. His friends laughed, too loud, too relieved. They knew the game, ridicule wrapped in banter. A power play disguised as a joke. Amira gave no reaction, her eyes locked on his, calm as still water. "I've played many styles." He clapped once. "Perfect. Well, the piano's just sitting there. How about you play us something? Come on. Let's see what the help can do." Someone at his table, a woman with cold eyes and diamond earrings, whispered, "Harrison." But he ignored her. He was performing now, emboldened by the room. Just one little tune. "We're all friends here." They weren't. And everyone knew it. Amira glanced at the piano. The usual player, Gregory, a seasoned jazz veteran, was on a break. The bench sat empty under the spotlight. She could feel the weight of the room shifting toward her. Other tables had gone quiet, forks paused, conversations frozen as the tension sharpened like a blade. She placed the empty glasses on her tray and straightened her spine. "I'll play," she said softly. Then she turned and walked. Harrison looked both victorious and baffled. He hadn't expected her to agree. He wanted to embarrass her, maybe get a laugh, maybe post it online, "Waitress plays chopsticks at fancy lounge." That kind of viral cruelty. But Amira wasn't walking like someone afraid. She moved with purpose. She stepped up to the piano, its black lacquer gleaming under soft lights. The lounge was holding its breath now. Even the bartenders had stopped pouring. She sat, adjusted the bench with slow, deliberate motion. Her fingers hovered over the keys, then dropped lightly, just enough to test the weight. The room was silent. Harrison leaned forward, smirking, expecting some clunky, awkward attempt at a melody. She didn't look at him. Or anyone, her hands settled. Her eyes closed, and she began to play. But it wasn't chopsticks. It wasn't gospel. It wasn't anything the room expected. It was Rachmaninoff. And it was furious. The first chord struck like a gunshot in velvet. The kind of piece no one stumbles through. The kind that demands years of training, emotional intelligence, and raw, unforgiving discipline. Her fingers flew with clarity and power, hitting arpeggios with precision, cascading down octaves like a waterfall made of fire. It wasn't just music. It was a reckoning. One man gasped audibly. A woman at table 4 covered her mouth. And Harrison? He froze. All the blood drained from his face as he realized this wasn't a joke. He had just asked a master pianist to perform for him like she was a circus act. And she accepted, not to entertain, but to annihilate. Amira played with storm force emotion, fury etched into every movement. Her body swayed with the rhythm, each note a dagger of truth. The pain. The years of being overlooked. The power of dignity finally unchained. She poured it all out. And the room? The room was silent. No phones. No whispers. Not even a cough. Only the music. It rose and crashed, soared and stabbed. Her hands moved faster than anyone could follow. She was a storm dressed as a server, unraveling years of mockery in the language of the divine. And just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. A final note, sustained, shimmering in the air like a last breath. Then, silence. Amira didn't bow. She stood. The entire lounge remained frozen until the first pair of hands began clapping. Then another. And another. It became an eruption. People stood. Some whistled. Some cried. And at the center of it all, Harrison sat slumped in his chair, as if every ounce of entitlement had been drained from his body. Amira turned without a word and walked back toward the kitchen. But the moment she passed table 6, Harrison finally spoke, his voice weak and cracked. "Wait, who are you?" She paused. "Just for a beat, someone you thought didn't matter." Then she disappeared through the staff door. The staff entrance door swung shut behind Amira with a soft click, but it might as well have been thunder. Back in the lounge, the applause continued, now laced with a strange kind of shame. It wasn't just admiration, it was the unsettling realization that they had just witnessed greatness where they least expected it. The kind of greatness that made you question everything about the assumptions you brought to the table with your filet mignon and 12-year scotch. At table 6, Harrison Moffat III looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. His friends didn't say a word. Not out of loyalty, but because silence was safer than pretending they hadn't just witnessed the most humiliating moment of Harrison's life. The man who mocked a woman into performing had ended up being the opening act for his own collapse. "Jesus," one of his buddies finally muttered, breaking the hush. Across the room, the chatter began to return, but it was hushed now, reverent. Guests whispered her name, though they didn't even know it. Someone asked if she was a guest performer. A woman at the bar Googled "black female pianist Rachmaninoff Charleston," as if the internet could explain what they had just seen. Back in the kitchen, Amira was washing her hands. They trembled not from fear, but from release. From a dam that had finally broken after years of holding back. Her coworker Malik, another server, peeked around the corner. "You good?" he asked, voice low. She didn't look up. "I'm fine." "Yo, you torched that place. People are still clapping out there." "Harrison looks like he's gonna cry." "I didn't do it for them." Malik hesitated. "Then who?" She finally met his eyes. "For me." And she meant it. Back on the floor, the general manager of Bellamy's, a stern man named Paul Gardner, was approaching table 6. He walked with the stiff spine of someone who had been managing egos for 20 years and still hadn't found the perfect script for moments like this. "Mr. Moffat," he began, tone even, professional, but ice-cold underneath. "I'd like to have a word." Harrison didn't look up. Paul continued, "You publicly humiliated a member of my staff. That is a serious breach of our code of conduct." Harrison finally snapped. "She humiliated me. That was a setup. I don't know who the hell she thinks she is. She didn't humiliate you, Paul said coolly. She played the piano. You chose to turn it into a spectacle. That's on you. One of Harrison's friends tried to jump in. Come on, Paul, don't make this a thing. But Paul raised a hand. It's already a thing. At that moment, from across the room, a man in a navy suit slowly rose from his corner table. Distinguished, silver-haired, with the calm presence of someone used to rooms full of power. He carried no arrogance, just gravity. He approached the grand piano, gently ran his hand along its polished surface, then looked toward the kitchen doors. Then, finally, he spoke. Someone bring her back out here. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Inside the kitchen, Amira was about to clock out when the manager appeared. Amira, Paul said, trying to mask the urgency in his voice, Mr. Langston would like a word with you. She frowned. Who? Andrew Langston. The owner. Amira froze. She'd never met the owner. Bellamy's was the kind of establishment where owners existed in myth, only mentioned in HR training videos or Christmas party rumors. The thought that he had been there, that he had seen all of it, was both terrifying and vindicating. She nodded slowly and wiped her hands on her apron. When she stepped back onto the floor, the lounge dimmed to a hush again. Conversations quieted like a theater curtain rising. All eyes turned. And standing at the piano was Langston. He turned to her, expression unreadable, then gestured toward the instrument. You didn't just play this, he said. You told a story. Amira said nothing. He stepped closer. Where did you study? Juilliard, she replied, quietly. Full scholarship. Graduated top 5%. A low gasp rolled through the room like a ripple. Why are you waiting tables? He asked, genuinely. Amira hesitated. My father got sick. Bills piled up. I left the circuit. I took what I could to help him. Then. I guess life moved on without me. Langston looked at her with new intensity. I want you here. Every night. Not in uniform. Not with a tray. But here, at this piano. As the feature. The star. Amira blinked. What about Gregory? Langston smiled. Gregory's retiring in a month. He told me last week. I was worried about replacing him, until tonight. Amira was speechless. Then Langston added, loud enough for the crowd to hear, and by the way, your wages will reflect your talent, not your apron. Applause erupted again, stronger this time, unfiltered, earned. Meanwhile, Harrison tried to slip away unnoticed, but he wasn't fast enough. A woman near the entrance called out, leaving so soon. He turned, annoyed. Yeah. What of it? She smirked. Just funny how fast you disappear when the cameras aren't on you. Harrison glared, but he had nothing. Nothing clever. Nothing cutting. He turned and walked. Back inside, Amira sat once more at the piano. But this time, she wasn't just playing. She was reclaiming. The following morning, Bellamy's Lounge was no longer just a fine dining establishment, it was a crime scene of shattered egos and reborn legends. The city buzzed with one question no one expected to be asking: who is Amira James? The answer spread faster than the wine list ever did. It started with a single video. Someone had recorded the entire piano performance, an over-the-shoulder shot, a little shaky, but clear enough to capture every powerful keystroke, every stunned reaction, and every note that seemed to grab the soul and shake it awake. By 9 a.m., it was on Twitter. By 10:15, it was on Instagram. By noon, Waitress destroys snob with piano revenge was trending on TikTok. Then came the think pieces. The interviews with anonymous guests who felt something shift in the air. A local radio DJ called it Charleston's Mozart moment. A viral caption read, he tried to humiliate her. Instead, she baptized the room with fire. By 2 p.m., reporters were calling Bellamy's, demanding a statement. Paul Gardner, the manager, fielded them with carefully worded replies, but he didn't need to defend anything. The performance spoke louder than any press release. The footage showed it all: Harrison's smug laugh, Amira's walk to the piano, and the eruption that followed. It was raw, cinematic, and unfiltered truth. But as the video soared through timelines and comment sections exploded with praise, one name was being dragged through the digital mud: Harrison Moffat III. His face, visible in the background of the viral clip, pale and squirming, became the new definition of internet shame. People dug through his past posts. Screenshots of his elitist tweets resurfaced. Old videos emerged, him shouting at valet staff, mocking a hotel cleaner, making jokes about minimum wage workers. In less than 6 hours, Harrison's image went from socialite to symbol of everything wrong with America's upper crust. And he knew it. Meanwhile, inside Bellamy's, Amira stood before the mirror in the employee locker room, staring at her reflection. She wasn't wearing the server's uniform anymore. Tonight, she would return to the lounge not with a tray in hand, but in a fitted black dress and heels, her first proper performance attire in nearly 5 years. Her fingers brushed lightly over her wrist, feeling the ghost of keys beneath the skin. Could she still hold that power again? Or was last night a lightning strike, one she couldn't repeat? She heard a knock. It was Paul. "They're already lining up outside," he said. "It's not even 5. Amira raised an eyebrow. "We don't open until 7. "I know," he said, smirking. "Doesn't seem to matter." 2 hours later, the line wrapped around the block. People came dressed like they were attending the opera, not dinner. Some carried printed screenshots of the video. Others wore pins that read, "Play it again, Amira." It was absurd. It was beautiful. Inside, the lounge had transformed. The lighting was dimmer, more theatrical. A new sign had been placed at the entrance to the piano platform, featuring Amira James, Knightley. As she stepped onto the floor, the room fell into hush again, but this time not from confusion or judgment. This time, it was reverence. The kind of hush reserved for greatness. She didn't rush. She moved like she belonged there. Because she did. As she sat down at the piano, someone from the crowd whispered, "That's her." Another person said, "She's going to play the piece again." But she didn't. She played something new. Something softer. Something that whispered instead of screamed. And still, it held them. The room dissolved around her, the lights, the tables, the audience, all gone. Only the music remained. Only her. By the time she finished, the applause was deafening. Later that night, Paul handed her a folded note from Langston: "Offer still stands, whatever you need. Don't just play here. Let us be your platform." She tucked it into her bag without a word. But not everything outside the room was applause. Back at the Moffat estate, Harrison was spinning in damage control. His phone was a war zone. PR firms were refusing to represent him. Sponsors were pulling out of his upcoming speaking engagements. Even his own father, Harold Moffat II, had left him a chilling voicemail: "You embarrassed this family. Fix it." But Harrison wasn't built for introspection. He wasn't built to apologize. Instead, he simmered. Pacing, muttering, pulling strings with people who still owed him favors. He didn't want to redeem his name, he wanted to crush hers. He made calls. Threatened lawsuits. Claimed defamation. But every door he knocked on closed before it opened. And still, she played. The next 3 nights were sold out. Reservations booked for weeks in advance. People came from different cities. Some flew in from out of state just to watch, the waitress who reminded the world what grace under fire looks like. But on the 4th night, Amira noticed something strange. After her second set, she walked backstage and found a white envelope resting on her dressing chair. No name. Just one sentence written in black marker across the front, "Stars fall too." Her stomach tightened. She looked around. No one else was backstage. She opened the envelope. Inside, no note. Just a single screenshot, an old photo of her in college, smiling, in a hoodie, hugging a man the internet had since forgotten, Marcus Fallon. Marcus, her ex-boyfriend. Marcus, who 2 years ago was arrested for wire fraud. Marcus, who she hadn't spoken to in over a year. The implication was clear. She sat down, heart pounding. Someone wanted to drag her name through the mud. To twist her narrative. To plant doubt. And she had a sick feeling she knew exactly who was behind it. The photo in her hand felt like poison seeping through her skin. Amira stared at the image of herself and Marcus Fallon, the man she once loved, the man she once trusted, until the morning she watched his face appear on the news alongside the words, "financial crimes," and 8-year sentence. Her heart didn't break that day. It imploded. She had cut all ties. Burned every bridge between them. Never answered his calls from prison. Never responded to his letters. And now, someone had dug it all up, not to ask questions, not to seek truth, but to weaponize it. She placed the envelope down slowly, composed her face, and walked out onto the floor like nothing had happened. The crowd welcomed her with the same wide eyes and parted lips. The piano waited like a loyal friend. She performed. Flawlessly. But inside her, something shifted. A chill behind her eyes. A fracture beneath the confidence. After the last note faded and the applause died, she walked directly to Paul's office and handed him the envelope. He opened it, brows tightening. What the hell is this? She didn't flinch. A warning shot. Paul sat back, processing. You think Harrison sent this? I don't think. I know. Paul let out a breath, heavy. We'll increase security. No one gets near your dressing room without a badge. Understood? Amira nodded, but her mind wasn't on security. It was on Marcus. She hadn't spoken his name in almost 3 years. But she remembered vividly the last time she saw him, smiling, lying, empty promises poured over diner tables and whispered between stage rehearsals. He had always said, "Baby, if one of us makes it, we both do." He made it into a courtroom. She made it into survival. And now, someone was trying to drag her back through his wreckage. Meanwhile, across town, Harrison was in a dimly lit cigar lounge surrounded by men who looked like mirrors of his father, old, pale, and used to running the world behind tinted glass. He laid out the plan. Not legal attacks. Not more public whining. Smear. Soft, strategic, viral. He had hired a boutique crisis firm that specialized in reputation rebalancing, a polite term for online sabotage. Phase 1 was planting old photos of Amira with Marcus across anonymous gossip pages. Phase 2 was hinting at unanswered questions about whether she benefited from the crimes. Phase 3 would be the kill shot, a fabricated anonymous claim that she'd used insider money from Marcus to pay her way through Juilliard. All of it smoke. All of it engineered to cast just enough doubt to muddy the water. What if it blows back? One of the men asked. Harrison didn't blink. It won't. I don't need to destroy her. Just dent her long enough to remind people she's not who they think. But Harrison miscalculated one thing. The world had changed. Not completely. But enough. The same digital wildfire that could burn someone alive, could also protect the right person when lit by the right truth. The gossip pages bit quickly. Within hours, posts began appearing. Who is Amira James, really? Waitress or fraud? Sources claim ties to disgraced felon Marcus Fallon. The hashtags shifted. The tone soured. Comments went from praise to suspicion. People who once celebrated her brilliance now dissected her past like vultures over a carcass they hadn't even verified was dead. At Bellamy's, a reporter approached the hostess stand with a smug grin. "Does Amira have a comment on the fraud claims?" The hostess responded with steel. "Do you have a comment on being trash?" The reporter left empty-handed. But the seed had been planted. That night, the crowd was thinner. The applause shorter. The looks, heavier. Amira walked to the piano like a woman entering a battlefield. And that's exactly what it had become. She Saturday and for the first time in days, her fingers hesitated, just for a beat. But in that beat was a war. Every insult she'd swallowed. Every moment of invisibility. Every eye roll from the elite. Every time she'd been called, sweetheart, honey, girl. Every dream she'd buried beneath bills and betrayal. Then she began to play. Not Rachmaninoff. Not Chopin. Something new. Something raw. She composed it right there, live, bleeding each note into the next, threading rage with resilience, stitching grief with pride. The melody clawed its way through the air, broken, defiant, alive. When she finished, she didn't wait for applause. She stood and walked straight out the door. Paul met her backstage. "Do you want me to pull the interviews?" She shook her head. "No. I'm done hiding." He raised an eyebrow. "You planning to respond?" She nodded. But not to them. That night, Amira sat at her kitchen table, opened her laptop, and recorded a message. One take. No script. No edits. "I'm Amira James. Yes, I dated Marcus Fallon. I loved him once. I trusted him. And he broke that trust. I left him the moment I found out who he really was. I've never taken a dime from him, and Juilliard knows that. My record is clean. My conscience is clear. And if you need me to be spotless to appreciate my music, maybe you're not really listening." She hit upload. By morning, the internet had chosen its side. And it wasn't Harrison's. The video sat online for less than 6 hours before it detonated. At first, it was shared cautiously, almost like a candle passed from hand to hand in a dark hallway. But once people really watched Amira's message, something shifted. Her voice wasn't angry. It wasn't defensive. It was firm, steady, and unflinching. Her face was bare. Her eyes clear. And when she said, "If you need me to be spotless to appreciate my music, maybe you're not really listening," she wasn't just defending herself, she was indicting an entire system of hypocrisy. By the end of the day, hundreds of thousands had seen the video. Then millions. Hashtags that had turned sour pivoted back, hashtag We Hear Amira. Hashtag Play It Again Amira. Hashtag Justice in 44 time. Celebrities retweeted her video. A congresswoman from Georgia wrote, "This is what grace looks like under attack." A famous jazz pianist posted, "If anyone needs a reminder of what resilience sounds like, her name is Amira James." But the most shocking call came not through social media. It came through a landline. Bellamy's front desk rang just after 3:15 p.m. Paul answered, distracted, still sifting through email requests for Amira's booking. But the moment he heard the voice on the other end, he straightened. "This is Samantha Yuan," the voice said. "Director of Artistic Programming at Lincoln Center." Paul blinked. "The Lincoln Center?" "Yes. I've watched Miss James's performance." And her statement. "Our board would like to extend a formal invitation for her to headline the opening night of our winter concert series." Paul's breath caught. "That's less than 6 weeks away. We'll pay whatever she requires. Travel. Lodging. Press. Full creative control. We're not asking for a media stunt. We're offering a platform for an artist who represents everything this moment needs." Paul didn't speak right away. Then, you'll need to tell her yourself. That evening, Amira stood in the green room backstage at Bellamy's, pacing slowly, mentally preparing for another set. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated. Then answered. The voice introduced itself. Calm, polished, professional. Amira listened. Then sat down. When the voice finished, Amira said only 4 words. I'll think about it. She hung up. And cried. Not because she was scared. Not because she felt unworthy. She cried because for the first time in years, someone had called her voice back to the center. Not to exploit. Not to silence. But to elevate. She performed that night like a woman on fire, but this time, the flames didn't consume her. They illuminated everything. The audience felt it. The staff felt it. Paul stood near the back of the lounge, arms folded, grinning like a man who knew he was witnessing the end of an era and the beginning of another. But the storm wasn't entirely over. Not yet. Across town, Harrison was watching the video again. The one of her response. Then the reaction videos. Then the standing ovations. The performance footage. The applause. And for the first time in his life, he felt something that no wealth, no last name, no carefully curated social circle had ever prepared him to handle. Irrelevance. He paced his condo like a caged animal. His phone, once filled with numbers of people desperate to associate with his power, now sat silent. His inbox was a graveyard of cancellations. His reputation firm ghosted him. Even his father had stopped returning calls. But Harrison wasn't broken. He was unraveling. And in that unraveling, something dark emerged. Not just resentment. Obsession. He pulled out a private phone. One not tracked. Not listed. A burner. He dialed. The voice on the other end answered, dry and disinterested. Yeah. Harrison's words were slow. Measured. I want her off that stage. Pause, that's not cheap. I didn't ask for cheap. I asked for permanent. The line went silent. Then, we'll talk numbers. Harrison hung up, his eyes locked on a paused video of Amira at the piano, mid-performance, hair swept back, brows furrowed in concentration, glowing under the lights. He muttered, barely audible. You took everything. And hit play. Snow flurried across the glass dome of Lincoln Center as the marquee lights flickered to life. Inside, the auditorium glowed with anticipation, the kind of energy usually reserved for legends, not someone who had been pouring coffee just weeks earlier. But tonight, the name, Amira James, wasn't whispered, it was revered. Every ticket sold out within 48 hours. The media swarmed the steps. The cameras waited. But inside the green room, Amira sat quietly, her hands resting on her lap, breathing slow, eyes closed. She could feel it pressing in from all sides, the expectations, the pressure, the invisible weight of proving not just her talent, but her right to exist in this space. Not because she was controversial, but because the world had tried to convince her she belonged beneath it. Paul adjusted her mic, they're ready. She nodded. But something tugged at the edge of her calm. That envelope. The photo. The anonymous threat. Harrison's silence. It had been too quiet. Too clean. Backstage, a security team scanned all staff twice. The Lincoln Center director personally met with Paul to assure her safety. But Paul didn't trust assurances. He trusted instincts. And his were screaming. Still, the show had to go on. The announcer stepped to the podium, his voice rich and commanding. Ladies and gentlemen, it is our profound honor to welcome to the stage tonight Miss Amira James. The crowd rose in applause before she even appeared. As she stepped into the light, wearing a long satin black dress that shimmered like ink under stars. A hush fell across the room, not out of skepticism, but reverence. She moved to the Steinway Grand at center stage, took her seat, and placed her fingers on the keys. No speech. No fanfare. Just silence. And then, sound. She played something new. A piece she had composed over the past 2 weeks, during late nights of reckoning and resolve. It had no name. Just emotion, layered and twisting, filled with both defiance and grace, rising and falling like a heartbeat in freefall. The room hung on every note. Every breath. The music wrapped itself around the ceiling and sank into every chest like memory. She didn't play to prove anything. She played because it was who she was. Every inch of her. Unapologetically. Halfway through the second movement, Paul noticed something. A man, dark coat, seat near the side door, stood up slowly, then slipped away, unnoticed by most. Paul's gut flipped. He nodded to security. Backstage, a guard quietly followed. The man reached into his coat pocket, too quickly. The guard drew first. Hands where I can see them. The man froze. Then raised both palms. Nothing. Empty. Security patted him down. A camera lens. A pocket recorder. Not a weapon. But something was off. Who are you with? No answer. They pulled his badge. Fake. They pulled him away. Meanwhile, Amira continued, unaware, the music soaring toward its final crescendo. But someone else was moving now. Not the man from the side door. Someone in the tech booth. Another fake credential. Another silence breached. He moved toward the light rigging, calm, precise. Then, click. Security radioed. Paul's voice shot into the comm, shut it down. But it was too late. The lights went black, the piano stopped mid-note. A single spotlight flared, center stage. Amira blinked, frozen under the sudden glare. A voice echoed through the sound system, not hers. Funny how one performance can make people forget what someone really is. Gasps. A beat of silence. Then, screens lit up. Someone had hijacked the visual feed. The massive screens on either side of the stage flashed the photo of Amira and Marcus Fallon, now edited with false bank receipts, crude overlays, and fake headlines, from lover to launderer. Paul yelled, "Kill the feed." Security yanked the cable. Darkness. Then. Silence. The entire auditorium held its breath. And in that pitch-black moment, Amira stood. She didn't run. She didn't cry, she didn't flinch. Her voice rang out, not through microphone, not through speakers. Just her. Real. Unfiltered. "Is that it, Harrison?" she said. "That the best you've got?" The audience stirred. Paul's heart stopped. She stepped forward. "My name is Amira James. You've all seen what I can do with music. But let me tell you what I can survive." The lights returned. Her face, calm. Composed. On fire. She pointed to the screen behind her, now dead. "That man tried to silence me with shame. But shame doesn't stick to the truth. It slides off." She walked back to the piano. "And if you want to ruin me, you better do better than recycled lies." She Saturday and played. The final movement wasn't written, she improvised every second. A battle in melody. A rejection of erasure. And when she struck the final note, her head high, her shoulders square, the entire room rose in thunderous applause, louder than anything the walls had ever held. Backstage, security dragged the second saboteur out the side door. A phone buzzed in his coat. On the screen, HM. Message, "Did it work?" Paul took the phone. Typed, "No." Hit send, and smashed it under his heel. That night, Amira didn't just win, she ended the war. A pause between movements. 3 months after the night Lincoln Center erupted in standing ovation, New York's rhythm had shifted. People still spoke of Amira James as a new icon, part virtuoso, part revolution. But Amira herself never described that night as a triumph. To her, it was a transition. A rest note between movements. A moment that separated who she used to be from who she hadn't fully become. Her debut album, No Apologies, dropped quietly in the 4th week after that now legendary performance. There was no glamorized cover. No artificial glow. Just a black and white photo of Amira sitting beside an old upright piano in her modest Brooklyn apartment, gazing out a foggy window. No jewelry. No stage lights. Just truth. The album shattered records in its first week, topping both jazz and classical charts. Invitations poured in: Tokyo, Berlin, Cape Town. International festivals. Global tours. Everyone wanted her. But unlike the overnight sensations who dove headfirst into the spotlight, Amira did something few expected. She paused. No talk shows. No morning interviews. No podcast monologues. She even turned down a headline slot at the Global Music Awards, an offer that made her manager Paul physically drop his coffee in disbelief. "Are you afraid of the spotlight?" he asked one evening. Amira had looked up from her keyboard and answered, "No. I'm afraid it might drown out the sound." One quiet Wednesday evening, without announcement, she returned to Bellamy's lounge. No media. No stage crew. Just a simple black dress and a request: "Can I have 30 minutes?" Langston said yes. Paul cleared the room. She sat down at the same piano that had once been a trap, and made it her sanctuary. She played not for a crowd, but for the room itself. For the shadows on the velvet curtains. For the ghosts at table 6. For the version of herself who once stood shaking under the weight of humiliation. The notes didn't rise in rebellion this time. They whispered. They forgave. When she finished, she remained at the piano long after the last note faded. Most of the staff had gone home. The lights dimmed. Only the soft glow of a single spotlight remained. Then, footsteps. A woman approached quietly. Middle-aged, gentle. She spoke without fanfare. "Ms. James?" "Yes. I run a music therapy program at a youth recovery center in the South Bronx. Most of the kids there don't believe they have a voice. I can't teach them Rachmaninoff. But maybe, you can teach them hope." Amira didn't answer right away. But a week later, she walked into that center. No grand piano. No lights. Just a chipped keyboard, 6 teenagers tapping pencils against metal tables, and one boy with an ear so sharp he could recognize key changes without ever touching a scale. Amira didn't tell them, "Listen to me." She asked, "What do you hear when everything else is silent?" A girl raised her hand and said, "I hear my own heartbeat." Amira smiled. "Good. Let's start there." While Amira made music in corners no one televised, Langston watched from afar. He didn't push. Didn't press her to sign long-term deals or brand herself for commercial packaging. He understood. Amira wasn't just an artist. She was becoming something rarer, a symbol not only heard, but learned from. And Harrison? No one spoke of him anymore. Rumors said he'd liquidated his assets, sold his Park Avenue condo, and vanished to an unnamed island in Central America. Others said he was living under an alias, clinging to the last of his influence in failed ventures. But to Amira, his silence no longer mattered. He was just another discarded page in a composition she'd rewritten. The best revenge, she realized, wasn't destruction. It was disappearance. Erasure through irrelevance. Amira still performed, but on her terms. She played at local churches every third Sunday. Jammed with street musicians in Harlem at 2 a.m. And soon, she would launch her own workshop series titled The Quiet Note, Finding Power in Stillness. At night, when the world wasn't watching, she returned home to her modest apartment in Brooklyn, brewed a cup of tea, opened the window, and played for no one but herself. No applause. No pressure. Just music. Just peace. Her story didn't end with a standing ovation. And maybe, that's exactly how a masterpiece is meant to end, not with a final chord, but a pause. A breath. A space waiting for whatever comes next, because somewhere beyond the curtain, Amira James still plays. And the world still listens. This story isn't just about a woman playing piano. It's about reclaiming identity when the world tries to write your name in pencil. It's about the strength of quiet dignity over loud cruelty. Amira James didn't just fight back, she transformed every insult into art, every attempt to silence her into a standing ovation. Because real power isn't about being loud. It's about being undeniable. In a world quick to label, cancel, or tear down, dignity is the new revolution. If this story moved you, hit that like button, because the world needs to hear more voices like Amira's. Drop a comment below, we rise louder than the lies. Let us know where you're watching from, because this movement is global. And if you're tired of seeing powerful voices get silenced, then don't scroll past, subscribe for more true stories that expose, empower, and echo long after the last note. Because on this channel, the last word belongs to justice.